Unsolved Mysteries Between Accessibility and Usability in iOS. That's a long title. But first, I would like to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Moh'd. I'm an iOS developer at ING Germany. I've been with ING for almost 5 years now. And maybe some of you are wondering, a bank, what has to do here in a developer conference? Well, I'm here to tell you, ING is a digital bank. We are more than 10,000 tickies spread in all over the world in more than 14 countries. And we're always trying to develop and better our software solution to our customers. And I personally like working at ING because I get to see what I develop being presented and given to the customers and use it all over the world. So today, we will talk about accessibility. So the presentation will take into two parts. The first part, I will explain to you what is accessibility in iOS. And then we will concentrate on one topic of the accessibility in iOS. Then I'll present you with our app, where we actually faced an issue between usability and accessibility. And then later on, in the second part, my colleague Stefan will come and continue the presentation. We prepared a demo project together that imitates our app and imitates the problem that we had in our app. And with him, step by step, in a coding session, you will get to find out the solution that we did in our app. So accessibility and the EU Accessibility Act. Accessibility and service. Service that is something that you provide for individuals to aid them in their daily work or in daily life. Accessibility and service is enabling this service for all individuals, whether they are disabled or whether they're not. If it was situational disability, temporary disability, or permanently disability. And since software is a service, this also applies for it. So there's a lot of tools that you can use in making your software accessible. And because there are 87 million disabled persons in the EU itself, came the European Accessibility Act, which is a directive where they defined requirements for companies to make their products and services accessible for these individuals. And that's why in ING, for the past 4 years, we've been working on this topic because we want to be the leading company in this topic and also the good example other companies should follow. Accessibility in iOS, as I said, there are multiple tools. This also applies for iOS platforms. For each type of disability, there are multiple categories for disability. If it was vision, mobility, cognitive, there are the proper tools that you can use to make your software accessible or make your application accessible. Today, I'll be talking more into the text size, which is a technical term in iOS is dynamic type. Dynamic type, what does it mean? It means to make your font size bigger on the screen. And this you can do in your iPhone. Just go to your settings under Accessibility tab, and there you can change the text size as you see in the animation. You see there's a slider where you can pick the preferred font size, and there's also a toggle on the top. When you enable this toggle, you will get even larger accessibility sizes. And when it's enabled, you get to see it gets really big. But also, if you notice, some components and some items on the screen did not get bigger. Because if it got bigger, the information will be missing. It'll be like misinformation, not presented very good. And for that, there is a nice tool that works hand with dynamic type, and it is called the large content viewer. This large content viewer is a view that presents itself in the middle of the screen with the content of the small item that did not get bigger in size. How do you enable this? How do you use this? It's just with a long press on the item itself. As you guys see here in the animation, we make a long press on the larger text title or the back navigation button, and the large content viewer presents itself with the content in a bigger font. To use the large content viewer and to use even more tools that are provided by Apple on the iOS platform, I would also recommend you to go and read about the human interface guidelines on Apple's website. There you will find a lot of text. It's very helpful. And also there's multiple examples that you can use in making your software accessible. So now we got to know what is accessibility, why the European Accessibility Act came to place, and we got to know what dynamic type is, what is the large content viewer, how you enable it. Now we can start and talk about the issue that we faced in our app, where our usability and accessibility clashed together. Before that, I will give you an introduction. So as you see, there are two screenshots of our apps. The one on the left is the older version, where we used to use means of navigation in the app with a burger menu at the top left corner. And we migrated newly to what we call a bottom navigation bar, which is actually a UI tab bar that is provided already from the UI kit, which is, as you see, it looks a bit better, reachable. The user can usually only use his or their thumb to just navigate through the app. It's also accessible as it comes automatically enabled with a large content viewer, what I explained previously. With a long press gesture on the item will be presented with a bigger text and a bigger icon for the user who enabled the dynamic type. So this is what we did, and we wanted also to get rid of the legacy code in our app. But now the feature that got also affected with this change, some features needed to change. So some individuals, they have multiple profiles in our app. And previously, they used to switch between these profiles only with 2 clicks. As you see in the first animation, opens the menu. If there is a profile, then switch to the second profile, automatically loads. With this migration, what happened, the user has to click at least 3 clicks. Go to the profile item, into the name, clicking, and then opens a profile switcher. And then the user clicks on the profile, and then it changes. But this did not... Our customer did not really like it. And because we care for our customers and we listen to them, we decided to make a feature for them that helps them in changing their profile quite faster. And what we did, we implemented a custom long press recognizer on the tab bar item. So this long press, when you do it, you perform it, it will open the profile switcher, and then the user can change the profile again with 2 clicks. But when we did this, as I said before, the dynamic type and the large content viewer, there's also enabling with a long press. So now there are 2 long presses on this tab bar. And there where we clashed, and we said, okay, what should we do? Okay, should we recognize the first dynamic type, large content viewer, or the action, the new action that we built up to open the profile switcher? And what we did actually, which was the mistake, we sacrificed accessibility. So we disabled all long gesture on the tab bar except for our custom one, where there now, okay, usability is quite higher, but there's no accessibility. And we needed to find a balance between them. And that's where the second part comes in our presentation, where my colleague Stefan will come and present you with a demo project that we prepared. And step by step, you will guys get to know how we solved this issue.
Thank you, Moh'd. Hi, I'm Stefan. I started developing iOS apps during my studies in 2010, and I'm now working for 5 years at ING. I've learned a lot from all kinds of projects, coming to the conclusion that testing is key, and so is accessibility. I can highly recommend you to integrate these 2 topics, testing and accessibility, into your workflows as early as possible. Today, I'm going to guide you through our live demo. But first, I wanted to ask how many iOS developers are here actually today? Oh, wow. Nice. Okay, seems a lot. Nice. Yeah. So earlier, Moh'd introduced you to our new transition from the burger menu to the tab bar in our banking app and a new profile switcher. And to demonstrate the challenges we faced while implementing the feature, we developed this small demo app. So let's assume Moh'd and I prepared for this keynote, and we immediately decided to create an app, which helps us with the preparation. So every iOS developer can relate, right? There's always a new case for a new app. And with this, we will start with the demo. When the app is launched, you see the My Notes screen, where Moh'd keeps his presenter's notes. Moh'd's bio you will find under the My Profile tab. And in order to switch to My Profile and My Notes, on the top left corner, you have a Profile Switch button, which presents this alert. And then we can select My Profile. Wouldn't it be great if we could actually switch the profile right in the Notes tab, right? Because we want to stay there and heavily write our notes. After having some discussions with our design experts, we came up with an idea. So we want to long press on the My Profile tab, and then the alert will be presented and we can immediately switch there. So before we dive right into coding, let me quickly introduce the tools we are going to work with. So 1 second. So on the left side, you will find Xcode source editor, where we are going to write the code today. Xcode is the main IDE we are using for iOS development. The language that we are going to use today is the Swift programming language. And on the right side, you will find the iOS simulator, where we will see what impact our code changes have on our app. So let me quickly launch the app within Xcode. And now I want to show you this developer feature, which is called environment overrides. So you find this at the bottom. And here we can basically enable dynamic type. So next, let me switch to the My Profile tab. And then now we will drag the slider to increase the font size. And when you watch, you see how the text updates. And also you notice that some elements do not adjust their font size. So like, for example, at the bottom, the tab bar, it does not change. But at the top, if you have seen it, so the title, I think it increased a little bit, right? And also the icons there. So notice when we cross the threshold to even larger font sizes, called large accessibility sizes, the large content sphere is displayed automatically when long pressing on any element. So first, we have to cross the threshold between the two sizes called XXX large and accessibility 1. Then by long pressing, for example, on the My Profile title, you will see the large content viewer. And if you tap on the My Profile tab, you will also see it. After the large content viewer is displayed, the action associated with the element is also executed. So, for example, in the My Notes tab, if you long press and if you release your finger, then it performs the transition to the screen. So, and now we are going to develop our feature by adding code snippets, and I will explain each one of them. So in the source editor, you can see the My Tab Bar controller, which is a subclass of UI Tab Bar controller. And a UI Tab Bar controller is a view controller that manages a set of UI views. In our case here, the tab bar at the bottom and the views of the view controllers, the My Notes and the My Profile screens in the center. And usually types that begin with the prefix UI, they indicate that they are part of UIKit, which we are importing as a module at the top. UIKit is the UI framework Moh'd already mentioned, provided by the iOS platform that we use in this demo app. First, we're going to initialize a UI long press gesture recognizer instance. And then we add it to the tab bar. And inside this view.didLoad method. The view.didLoad method gets called as soon as the view associated with the view controller, in this case the My Tab Bar controller, gets loaded before it's being actually presented on the screen. And the gesture recognizer is a UI component which detects the user's touches on the screen. And it will then perform the action on a given target when the gesture is recognized. Next, let's implement the action. So here we validate if we should actually present it on the screen. And for this, we have this method. When true, we present it. When false, we do nothing. Next, let's implement this method. First, we make sure that the gesture actually has detected a long press. And second, we validate if the profile tab has been pressed and return the result. So let's implement the algorithm. So here, we first get the tab views from the tab bar. Then we determine the index of the tab view, which actually contains the gesture recognizer's touch location. If the index is 1, meaning the My Profile tab, we return true. Otherwise, we return false. So very simple. Let's test our feature. So if we run the app and then we long press on the tab, our alert will be presented. So this worked out very nicely, and we can also switch, of course. So I like to make 2 remarks though here. So the first, the algorithm for detecting if the My Profile tab has been pressed depends actually on the implementation of the tab bar. So let's revisit the algorithm once more. If you take a closer look at the code that retrieves the subviews or the tab views, we notice that we use the method drop first. So why are we always dropping the first tab view, you may wonder? And for this, let me visualize it. So when we run the app now again, you see at the bottom the different colors, yeah? And you see now there are 3 views. So 1 is, or 2 are actually our tab views that we are interested in, and 1 background view. Unfortunately, the UI tab bar provided by UIKit does not expose its tab views. So we have to access and iterate over all of its subviews. Although there's nothing wrong with accessing the views, subviews, you need to be aware of that in this case, we do not own the implementation of the UI tab bar. So its internals might change at any time with a new release of iOS. So there's a chance we might have to revisit the algorithm later and apply fixes or rewrite it entirely. So for example, if they change the order or whatever, or add another view to it. In our case, we take this decision to stick to this algorithm since we want to use most of the UI tab bar's default behavior, including all its accessibility features, without implementing our own custom tab bar. Speaking of accessibility, Moh'd introduced you to the dynamic type in the first part of this presentation. Of course, we want to make sure that our app also supports dynamic type and the large content viewer. So let's see how our app actually behaves when it has to respond to changes in the system font size. But first, we remove the code that visualizes the subviews and run the app again. Then we have to enable dynamic type first, and then we have to cross the threshold to the larger font sizes, so the large content viewer gets actually enabled. And if we now long press, you will see that the large content viewer wins, basically, right? Our profile switcher does not work anymore. So at this point, it's time to grab a coffee and take a breath, and then have a look at the developer documentation of the APIs, actually. After browsing the documentation for the UI long press gesture recognizer, we discovered APIs which might help us to solve our problem. So let me show you their usage now. So we are going to implement a protocol called UI gesture recognizer delegate. So a protocol in Swift is basically like an interface in Java. And first, we assign the My tab bar controller instance to the gesture recognizer's delegate. And we use the keyword self here. And then let the My tab bar controller class conform to this protocol. And the method we are looking for is actually called gesture recognizer should recognize simultaneously with. So let's implement that. So by returning true here, we tell our long press to be simultaneously recognized with any other gesture recognizer. And let's see how this impacts our app. So first we make sure, of course, that we can actually, that the alert is still displayed. So this still works. And now we enable dynamic type again. And we are already on the larger font sizes. And then by long pressing, you see then it somehow worked. Okay, we are not, it looks promising, I would say. So let me summarize what we achieved so far. So the tab bar's default behavior in terms of accessibility is preserved. Our switch profile alert is shown when long pressing on the My Profile tab. We have one issue. Of course, it's being overlaid, okay? So it's not really usable. Let's synchronize the presentation of the large content viewer with the presentation of our switch profile alert. And for this, we first have to disable the long press basically of the large content viewer. And we store it in a variable called default long press. And this we need to store in this reference. And we will assign it in this method. The gesture recognizer should recognize simultaneously with. Let's see when we run the app what it happens. So first we check if our default behavior still works, so this is fine. Then we enable dynamic type again. And now let's try to long press. So this worked out very nicely. So there's no overlay anymore. But of course, when we now try to long press on, for example, the My Notes, then the large content viewer is of course disabled. So we need to address this. And we do it like this, that we enable it again after we have presented the alert. So basically everything is restored. So it looks now like this, that when we enable dynamic type, and we would switch the profile, then also the large content viewer still works. And we can still, our feature basically is now ready, but also notice we have one thing that remains. One final optimization we could do is actually that we increase the amount of time until our switch profile alert is presented. So this can give the user more time to read and understand what the large content viewer actually displays. Okay, so it was very quick, the presentation. So I will show you how we solved this. So in the view did load, we basically recognize for this notification. And when the notification is triggered by the system and tells us, hey, the status of the long press or the large content viewer has changed, then we will basically update the time interval that we set for the minimum press duration on our long press. Let's see, we set it to 1.5 seconds, and let's see the impact. So let's enable the dynamic type, and then we long press. So now you noticed we have a better transition, I would say. And also what you have to watch out is that the large content viewer can also be canceled. So maybe there's a user that just wants to know about this and then moves away with the finger. This is also working, right? Because you have a longer time period until our switch alert can pop up, right? So you can also increase the amount of time, for example. You have seen how easily it can happen that we break basic accessibility features of system components by extending their behavior in order to adapt them to our needs. So I can recommend to try to integrate accessibility early in your workflows. So you can detect, communicate, and also address issues as soon as possible while still having time basically to reflect on your choices, I would say. Maybe it has an impact on the design of your feature as a whole, so maybe it does not work out at all. Okay. So as Moh'd mentioned before, we try to keep a balance between usability and accessibility and preserving accessibility features provided by system components. We covered some basic terms regarding accessibility in general, the European Accessibility Act, and a selection from the broad range of accessibility features on iOS, like dynamic type and the large content viewer, especially their behavior when adapting UI tab art to your specific needs. So I hope with this short demo you've gained some insights which you can apply to your projects. Thank you all for listening.